After I accepted a job to work for Nick Saban, I was excited to be Alabama's offensive coordinator. Obviously, it should be much easier to succeed, and I was on the path to getting a head coaching job at the end of the season. I was only going to stay here for a year, and I was ready to take on the new SEC. My first coaching gig was against Wisconsin, and I was going to be in charge of making sure Jalen Milroe could run my offense. It shouldn't be too difficult considering how talented this entire team is, and I instantly loved coaching for the Crimson Tide. Not only did I have the best receiving core in the entire nation, but I had great running backs as well. In the end, I got my first win at Alabama, and I was excited to see how the year went. The next week, I got to travel back to my home, Kentucky, and I was thrilled to finally coach in front of my family. Jalen Milroe started the game out by using his legs, juking by Kentucky defenders with ease, and stumbling for extra yards. I told him he needed to run today because of the downpour, and it was going to be a tough battle. Due to the rain, I went back to my option run routes, and the plays I was calling were not only getting us a lot of yards, but thrashing the Kentucky defense. Sophomore running back Jamarian Miller had a huge burst of acceleration on this touchdown run, and after Jalen Milroe couldn't get this throw out in time, I was glad I had the refs on my side as an Alabama coach. Truthfully, the cannon that my quarterback had this season made CJ Montez look like a bum, so I was fortunate to be in the position I was in, because if we're being honest, this would get me a head coaching job. And if I had learned anything so far throughout my first 2 games at Alabama, it was that as I got bigger job offers throughout the series, my life would get so much easier. Everybody on the Crimson Tide was so good, and because of that, I was 2-0, which meant I was already eyeing head coach openings for the end of the year. However, none of that is guaranteed, so I needed to focus up because my offense was off to a bad start at Kyle Field. And after this terrible read, which turned into an interception, I screamed at Jalen Milroe while he walked off the field. I think it really got to him because with a minute left in the first quarter, he connected with JoJo Earle for a massive 80-yard touchdown play to get us within 7, and JoJo Earle was having an amazing game fighting for every last yard that he could get. I really do believe that my outburst changed how Jalen Milroe played because he performed extremely well the rest of the game. Even though we started off poorly against Texas A&M, by the end of it, we were on pace to beat the Aggies, but then Jalen Milroe could have just slid and ended the game, but instead, he took a hit and lost the ball. So all of a sudden, my offense was in an overtime shootout on the road, and I was calling all of the right plays. But unfortunately, the Crimson Tide's defense was absolutely pitiful until they got this huge stop on the 2-point conversion. So now all we needed to do was get a touchdown on Texas A&M and make this game-winning 2-point conversion. I was extremely pumped about this result, and I was now the coordinator of a potential Heisman winner. But I was super upset when Jalen Milroe started our game against South Carolina with a terrible underthrow, so I screamed at him like last week, and because of that, he responded by delivering this 52-yard touchdown bomb to wide receiver JoJo Earle. I'm not saying yelling at your players always works, but for Jalen Milroe, it seemed to get him back on track. But unfortunately, as a coach, my job was about to get 10 times harder. Jalen Milroe pulled his groin on that play, so I was now stuck coaching a new quarterback, and seriously, who on earth is Mike Tyler? With his shocking 59 speed, I was forced to stop calling option runs, and I was not excited to deal with coaching a freshman quarterback for the next 4 weeks. All of a sudden, my entire offensive game plan was going to run through Jamarian Miller, but that got boring fast, so I decided to force Mike Tyler to sling it with us up by 21, and surprisingly, his deep ball perfectly hit Kobe Prentice in stride for an 80-yard touchdown. Now that we had a comfortable lead, I let my quarterback try and pick up some extra yards with an option run. But obviously, he wasn't the ideal starter, and the following few weeks could be rough. Our next opponent was North Dakota State, and I called one of the weirdest plays in college football history to start the game, but it only got a couple of yards. No matter how creative I got, it seemed like I'd have to rely on the freshman quarterback to sling it, because whenever I gave the Wildcat formation a shot, it failed. And even though Mike Tyler struggled to complete passes throughout the game, my running play calls were good enough to get us an easy win over the Bison, and we improved to 5-0. This game against an SEC team would be our freshman quarterback's first real test, and since it was against Vanderbilt, I wasn't too concerned about it. I decided to call a play where Mike Tyler could throw a deep ball, and despite my doubts, for the second time in the past few weeks, he delivered a perfect bomb for a touchdown. And so I let him do it again. Midway through the second quarter, Mike Tyler was showing that he could make any pass on the field, hitting sophomore wide receiver Kendrick Law on a 73-yard play. I had no clue where this guy came from, but all of a sudden, he was proving he could potentially stay the starter, and I thought I was going to struggle to coach the offense with a freshman QB, but instead, Mike Tyler was going to make it extremely difficult to choose a quarterback for the rest of the year. Jalen Milroe was still out for 2 weeks, so he was going to get his chance, and this rain game would be a great opportunity for him. I had a tough decision to make at starting QB, so when backup quarterback Mike Tyler started off against Georgia with a pass to Kobe Prentice that would turn into a 63-yard touchdown, I was very impressed. He was already building amazing chemistry with the rest of the offense, so you know I was excited after this 39-yard dot to Kendrick Law. He was only a freshman, so there was still room for improvement, but I felt like he had the potential to be great. However, I can't sit here and act like he was perfect with missed throws that should have been touchdowns and horrendous reads that led to bulldog interceptions. With how the second half went, I felt like the first half could have been a fluke, and with 39 seconds left, we found ourselves in a tie game, so I was very happy to see that JoJo Earl got us almost all the way to midfield. Then Mike Tyler stepped up and put us in a position to win by finding Kendrick Law with this 31-yard laser, and after our kicker nailed the game winner, I was relieved that we stayed undefeated. But there was definitely a quarterback controversy. We were tied with our rivals for the division, so this game was very important, and I was ready to see how backup quarterback Mike Tyler played. I told him how crucial it was for him to go out and dominate so he could steal Jalen Milroe's spot when he came back, but he was extremely inconsistent sometimes. After he threw a dot, he turned around and threw an interception straight to the defense, which wasn't just a turnover, but a game changer as Arkansas took it all the way back to the house. So I could tell Nick Saban wasn't impressed, and he needed to be for Mike Tyler to remain QB1. I can't lie, I love coaching the freshmen, but I can't defend this play. Arkansas would take the interception back for their second pick six of the day, which put us in a bad situation. I was going to need to start calling some different plays because I felt like the Razorbacks had figured out how to stop my offense and my quarterback. This third interception almost went all the way back for another pick six, but he was fortunately stopped short. However, Arkansas scored anyway, so it was 27-0, and I felt like Mike Tyler had completely blown his chance. We finally got on the board with this kick, but in the end, it just wouldn't matter at all. Maybe I could take Mike Tyler with me to my new team, but I knew Nick Saban wouldn't want him starting again. So I was surprised that Mike Tyler was starting against Tennessee, but it was only because Jalen Milroe was still out. Therefore, I still had to coach the backup quarterback, and after last week, he was looking to bounce back, which was good news for us. He ended up putting us up by 7 in the second quarter, and I learned that leaning on our running game was a good option. I was excited to end the first half up by 21 points, and I had figured out how to coach the offense with less pressure on the quarterback. By the end of the game, it was clear that we were going to win, and I was so proud of Mike Tyler that I gave him a hug, but he wouldn't see the field again. So I was upset with Nick Saban because with Jalen Milroe back from injury, he decided to make him the starting quarterback. But at the end of the day, all I could do was call the offensive plays, and I was just trying to avoid an upset loss to Appalachian State at home. Fortunately, we were not Michigan or Texas A&M, and even though it ended up being a close battle, in the end, we would beat Appalachian State by 8. But Jalen Milroe had a terrible first game back, and he needed to perform well with the playoffs on the line. I was coaching at the Swamp for the first time ever, and without our starting running back in this top 5 matchup, I was forced to call a lot of passing plays. We were down 14 at the end of the first quarter, but that wouldn't last for long as I let Jalen Milroe attempt a deep throw on 3rd and 9, which led to a 55-yard touchdown by sophomore Kendrick Law, and he continued to find the open wide receiver. On the last play of the second quarter, I'm just going to let you watch what could have been one of the greatest plays ever. Jalen Milroe somehow escaped the collapsing pocket and found Kobe Prentice down the field, but unfortunately he didn't get any blocks, so we wouldn't take the lead until the third quarter. I kept trying to get the running game going, but since it didn't work, I had to call passing plays instead, which led to a beautiful dot from Jalen Milroe. With a minute left, I watched our defense stop the Gators on 4th and 14, and from there we would pick up this huge 3rd down and end the game. I was so proud of Jalen Milroe as he played so much better this week, and maybe Saban was right about him being the starter, but I still felt bad for Mike Tyler. If I could coach this offense to a win against our rivals, we would clinch a spot in the SEC championship, but we were certainly not off to a good start against Auburn. They were locking up our receivers and Jalen Milroe was struggling, so I ripped him a new one on the sideline, which ended up working like always. He was able to throw a touchdown pass just a couple of minutes later, and midway through the second quarter, He would place a pass perfectly over the Auburn defense to JoJo Earle for a 56-yard touchdown which tied the game. But by the third quarter, we were back down 10 and struggling. So I was relieved we scored a couple of minutes later. To start the fourth, we ended up going up by 10 points, and when Auburn responded right back with a touchdown of their own, I knew this would be a crazy finish. With 2 minutes left, Jalen Milroe threaded the needle on an amazing play call by me, but Auburn scored again, so we only had 39 seconds left to get a field goal. And with time winding down, it looked like we had just gotten into kicking range. I watched as the Alabama kicker tied it up, and now it was time for overtime where we got into the end zone first. After our defense held Auburn to a field goal in the second overtime, we were set. All we had to do was get a touchdown, and we did that. I was pumped that we escaped with a win, and it was behind Jalen Milroe's 7 touchdowns. I felt like I could land any of these jobs now, but first, I had to coach in the SEC Championship, and after this great play call by me, we were off to a good start. Then, Jamarian Miller rushed for 13 yards to score the first touchdown, but you might have noticed that Mike Taylor was back in the game, and that's because Jalen Milroe suffered a concussion, which was going to be a problem. Mike Taylor hadn't played a snap in almost a month, so I realized that I was going to need to switch up my play calling if we wanted any chance to win. This kick tied it up at 10, and by the fourth quarter, we were still stuck in a tie. Every time I tried to let Mike Taylor sling it, he couldn't get anything going, and the fact that we were still in this game was incredible. I love the guy, so I put all my faith in him with 2 minutes left, and then he finally came alive and did something right. He found running back Jamarian Miller, who would take it 58 yards while juking and breaking tackles to get us into the end zone. After that, I wish I could say it went to overtime, but Ole Miss scored, leaving us with about 30 seconds left, and on our last chance to tie it up, Mike Taylor dropped back and threw the Hail Mary just a bit too far. So we lost the SEC Championship, and I was ready to get a head coaching job. But before I could choose a new team, I had to coach in the Peach Bowl, and we were off to a good start against Florida State. We continued to put up points, but we were down by 6 going into the fourth, so I knew that I needed to call some of my best plays yet, and I started coaching on a whole other level. With 30 seconds left, we were setting up to settle for 3 and kick the game winner on the Seminoles, which is exactly what ended up happening, and after finishing my season at 12-2, I was ready to find my first head coaching job. I came to Alabama to get other offers, so I rejected their contract extension, and Marshall, Tulsa, Ohio, Louisville, Western Michigan, and Ball State all offered me head coaching positions. In the end, I decided that you should tell me which school I should coach at in the comments, and my decision will be out Sunday the 27th at 4 p.m. EST.